The Assassin's Creed franchise is one of the biggest games in pop culture history, but it does beg the question, who were the real assassins behind the games? Well, we're going to do a deep dive and actually look at the real history of the real assassins. When you hear the word assassin, what do you see? A warrior in white, leaping from rooftops, a secret brotherhood fighting a timeless war against the Templars. But forget the video games, the real history is so much better. The assassins were very real, but they weren't heroes from a fantasy novel. They were a medieval religious group born from persecution who terrified entire empires with a tactic they perfected, the surgical public assassination as an act of war. This is the true story of the Nizari Ismaili, the masters of the fortress of Alamet. It's a story not of a hidden blade, but of a visible dagger. It's a history of survival against impossible odds and how a small, isolated community brought the most powerful rulers of the day to their knees, using little more than conviction and fear. The pop culture image of the assassin is a phantom, a cool fiction, sure, but one that's loosely draped over a far more complex and fascinating reality. The real assassins weren't a globe-spanning order fighting for an abstract ideal like free will. They were a specific sect of Shia Islam, the Nizari Ismaili, fighting for something much more concrete, their own survival. Their story isn't about a mythical war with the Knights Templar. It's about a small religious minority trying to carve out a space for themselves in a hostile world. A world dominated by the massive Seljuk Empire. To get them, you have to peel back the layers of myth and look at the world that made them. Our story kicks off in the turbulent 11th century, a time of deep division in the Islamic world. You had the major schism between the Sunni and Shia Islam. But even within Shiism, there were more fractures. The Ismaili were one of those branches, and in the late 11th century, they hit a crisis of their own. When the Ismaili spiritual head, the Fatimid Caliph in Cairo, died, a fight over his succession tore the community in two. Most of the leadership in Egypt backed the younger son, al-Mustali, but over in Persia, a brilliant and charismatic Ismaili leader named Hassan is-Sabah championed the elder son, Nizar. Hassan and his followers believed Nizar was the true spiritual heir, the rightful imam. When Nizar was defeated and executed, his followers became known as the Nizari Ismaili. Suddenly, they were cut off, branded heretics by both the Sunni majority and the new Ismaili leadership in Cairo. They were a minority within a minority, surrounded by enemies. The biggest threat was the Seljuk Empire, a powerful Sunni Turkish dynasty that saw the Nizari as dangerous troublemakers who needed to be crushed. Outnumbered and outgunned, Hassan is-Sabah knew a conventional war would be suicide. He needed a new kind of strategy, a new kind of state, and a new kind of weapon. He found the first piece of his puzzle high in the Alborz mountains of northern Iran. In 1090, Hassan set his sights on the fortress of Alamut, a castle so high and inaccessible its name meant Eagle's Nest. Taking it by force was out of the question, so Hassan didn't use an army, he used an idea. For years, he sent his missionaries, his da'i, into the valley around Alamut. They lived among the people, quietly sharing their faith and earning their trust. Legend has it that Hassan himself eventually slipped into the castle in disguise, perhaps as a schoolteacher. By the time the castle's commander realised what was happening, his own men had converted and sworn allegiance to Hassan. In a masterstroke of bloodless conquest, Hassan offered the commander 3,000 gold dinar for the fortress he already effectively controlled. The commander took the deal, and Alamut became the headquarters of the new Nizari state. But Alamut was more than a military base. Under Hassan, it became the centre of learning with a legendary library, a beacon of intellectual freedom. From this stronghold, and others they soon captured, the Nizari built a network of fortified enclaves across Persia and later Syria. It was a state connected not by land, but by faith and unwavering loyalty. To defend this scattered state, though, they needed to project power far beyond their mountain walls. Facing the colossal armies of the Seljuk Empire, Hassan innovated. He couldn't match them soldier for soldier, so he wouldn't even try. Instead, he would cut the head off the snake. This was the birth of their legendary strategy, targeted political assassination. Hassan created a special class of operatives known as the Fidei, those who sacrifice. These weren't mindless killers. They were highly trained, deeply devoted followers who saw their missions as both a political and religious duty. Their weapon of choice was the dagger, and their operations were pure psychological warfare. A Nizari assassination wasn't a quiet poisoning or a hidden arrow, it was a public performance. A Fidei would often strike in a crowded mosque or a royal court, making sure that there were plenty of witnesses. Escape was rarely a part of the plan. To be killed on the mission was a form of martyrdom. The message this sent was terrifyingly clear. No ruler, no general, no vizier was safe. No matter how many guards you had, a single determined person could get to you. This created a level of paranoia totally out of proportion to the Nizari's actual members. They had turned the dagger into a weapon that could destabilize empires. The Nizari campaign kicked off with a bang. In 1092, it's wildly believed that a Fidei disguised as a Sufi mystic got close to and killed Nizam al-Mulk, the Grand Vizier and the most powerful man in the Seljuk Empire. His death threw the empire into chaos and proved just how effective Hassan's strategy was. Many other high-ranking officials would follow. While most of their targets were rival Muslim leaders, their reputation in the West was cemented during the Crusades. In 1192, two Fideis, in an attack that shocked the Crusader states, stabbed Conrad of Montferrat to death just days after he was elected King of Jerusalem. The popular account says they disguised themselves as Christian monks to get close to him. This brazen killing fueled the growing legend of the merciless assassins. And it was around this time that the quote, Black Legends really took off. Their enemies, baffled by the devotion of the Fidei, spun wild tales. The most famous comes from the Venetian traveller Marco Polo, who passed through the area long after the Nizari were gone. But he recorded and popularised the story of the Old Man of the Mountain, who would supposedly drug his followers with hashish, show them a secret garden of paradise, and then promise them a permanent ticket back if they completed their suicide missions. This story is the origin of the name Hashashin, or hashish users, a slur used by their enemies. Modern scholarship has found absolutely no evidence to support these tales of drug-fueled rituals or paradise gardens. The Fidei were motivated by their faith, and the belief that they were fighting a just war for their community's survival. The Hashashin legend was simply incredibly effective propaganda. So let's directly address the video game in the room, Assassin's Creed. How does its sprawling story stack up against the historical record? First, the game's Assassin Brotherhood is a globe-spanning secret society fighting a 1,000-year war against the Templars over the concept of free will. The real assassins were the Nizari Ismaili, a specific religious community in Persia and Syria, fighting a very public war for their survival against enemies like the Seljuk Empire. Next, the methods. The game hero uses a hidden blade and prioritizes stealth. The historical Fidei did the exact opposite. They used a visible dagger and their attacks were public spectacles meant to inspire terror. Escape was not the primary goal, martyrdom for their cause was seen as the highest honour. And finally, the motivation. The games propose a philosophical creed. The reality was much more grounded. The Nizari Ismaili weren't fighting for an abstract ideal, they were fighting for their right to exist as a religious minority in a hostile world. Their creed was a deep religious conviction in their leader, their community, and their cause. While the games get the aesthetics of a dedicated, formidable group right, they swap the complex and desperate history of Nizaris for a grand, entertaining fantasy. And for nearly a century and a half, the Nizari state survived, a network of islands in a sea of enemies. They outlasted the Seljuks and held their own against Crusaders. But in the mid-13th century, a new power rose from the east that couldn't be stopped with a dagger. The Mongols. Led by Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, the Mongol army swept across Persia. They brought advanced siege weapons, including Chinese engineers, and a level of brutality that was off the charts. The Nizari fortresses, built to withstand 12th century armies, were now facing relentless bombardment from powerful trebuchets. The last leader of Alamut, Rukn al-Din Kashar, tried to negotiate to save his people, but Hulagu demanded total submission. After a key fortress fell, Kashar surrendered and ordered his remaining castles, including Alamut, to do the same. In 1256, the Mongols marched into the Eagle's Nest. Sources tell us that they systematically dismantled its fortifications and, in an act of cultural destruction, burned its magnificent library, wiping out generations of knowledge. The Nizari fortress state in Persia was annihilated. So, who were the assassins? They weren't the parkour heroes from video games or the drugged up killers from Marco Polo's stories. They were the Nizari Ismaili, a sophisticated and resilient community facing extinction. Led by the brilliant Hassan Isabar, they created a unique, decentralized state that perfected a form of asymmetric warfare that let them survive for over 160 years. Their use of political assassination was brutal, but it wasn't random terror. It was a calculated military strategy, a weapon of the weak against the strong, used to defend their right to exist. They were scholars and theologians as much as they were warriors. The story of the real assassins is a powerful reminder that history is often written by the victors, and that the truth is frequently buried under layers of myth. They weren't just history's most misunderstood killers, they were one of history's most remarkable survivors. The true story of the assassins is probably even more intriguing than they are in the video games. An incredible moment of history and an unbelievable story. And if you love more of these deep dives from not just Assassin's Creed, but also the Viking era, medieval history, and everything in between, make sure that you like the video, subscribe for more, and we will see you again on the next episode of the Time Travel Tavern.